Hey guys, Jared Duckett, Duckett Ladd Dental CPAs and Advisors, back here with another episode with my business partner Bill Ladd and Dr. Abernathy. Guys, appreciate you joining back in and talking some more dentistry, right?
You got it.
Today we wanted to hit on big word, leadership. And I think as you doctors have probably seen, is leadership is extremely crucial, and probably it's never been more important than right now. You know, going through this pandemic is displaying good leadership to your team and assuring them that they're going to be okay and you're going to get to the other side and everything basically regarding leadership in your business. But we wanted to dive in about how exactly on leadership is how should you be looking at leadership now? Maybe you should be looking at it differently. What can you to be a better leader and to guide your team, to the other side? So let's dive in here a little bit. And Dr. Abernathy, I'll throw it to you. Is leadership in a dental practice? This might be a topic a lot of dentists don't think about because they're strictly thinking about being the technician. But
Right.
leadership in a dental practice, how should the doctor be looking at this differently? Maybe they didn't focus on it before. Maybe they didn't consider themselves a good leader. How should they be looking at it differently to set themselves up going forward?
Right. I mean, leadership's kind of one of those default things. I mean, someone has to step up and lead, or it'll just be chaos. And most of the practices I see are kind of controlled chaos. And the nice thing about leadership is it's not one of those things where like you're a natural born anything. I mean, leadership can be taught, it can be learned. But it's certainly necessary. And I always kind of thought of my team as kind of like kids. I mean, if I'm around my grandkids or around even my kids they're in their late 30s, early 40s. I mean, I still feel like I'm modeling. It's almost like you cannot not lead. I feel like I'm modeling what I say, what I do. I mean, if I say, hey, we need to be more consumer conscious or something like that, and then I don't act that way, I mean, I'm leading. Okay, it's not a good lesson. So yeah, I know. I think doctor leadership is probably one of the most important and the most put to the back of priorities with most doctors. They just really want to do the dentistry, and I'm sorry, it's just you're never going to have a great practice without you being a good leader. Now, if you don't mind me just kind of going my sermonette here just a second. I mean, being a good leader doesn't mean that you're the smartest person in the room. I think good leaders actually know what they don't do well. And so sometimes great leadership could be hiring people that not only complement you in the culture of your practice, but it also compensates for you. I mean, I'm not a really great people person. I mean, I can pretend. It's getting harder and harder as we keep doing more and of these to be nice, guys. I mean, it's like, it's not my nature. I mean, I like being alone. I don't like being in crowds and stuff like that. But I had to pretend every day for almost 50 years. And so it's one of those things that, you cannot not lead. It's always there. You're always saying something. You're always doing things. And again, the first task of a leader is to define what's reality, what's core. Now, a lot of us are recovering from, a pandemic. We're either getting ready to open, we just opened, or we opened last week, or whatever it was, okay? And if we actually self-diagnosed ourselves back at a time when everything was going well, it really wasn't going that well anyway. And I think you can say that when you look at a practice that's not doing well, generally there's going to be a weak leader, because by omission or commission, you're responsible. The buck stops with you. I mean, you could just not do something, and that could mean poor leadership. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, defining what's reality core in your practice is super important.
Well, let me ask you a question. With all the doctors that you have worked with, what percentage of doctors that had an extremely successful practice, what percentage of those were bad leaders?
Hardly any of them. Now, again, the trouble with the word leadership, it's it's a common word, like so many times it's a common word, but it can mean something different to different. Okay, and so oftentimes in really good practices, I see generally a better leader. I see great systems and protocols, and then I also see the doctor, even if we don't include this in leadership, being uh, has a lot of horsepower and is very persistent, and even if they're not a good leader, they generally can plow through it, and so again, I don't know what you want to include in leadership, but I guess one way to look at leadership might be looking at the ultimate goal in leadership, right? I mean, if you look in the Bible and say, maybe works aren't important, but you can tell a lot about people and what they do, right? And so, again, this ultimate goal in leadership might be a committed staff. I mean, in poor leadership, you can be hard driving, horsepower, very persistent, and you can get people to do what you want them to do. They're kind of conceding. They're just, they're not committed to it. They're just, they're just doing what they have to do. I think that's not good leadership. Committed staff. Committed is really just an emotional yes to your culture and what you want to do. Generally, great leaders have really, really strong cultures, and they're the type of cultures, and you can kind of measure it by the fact that the staff people are standing in line to work with you. Generally, doctors that are great leaders, that have great staffs, that have great cultures, have lots of new patients. In a really strong led practice, you don't really have to manage people. I know that's kind of a contradiction in terms, but I mean,
I think
we
most
need to
doctors
talk.
are scratching their head right now being, what do you
I
mean I
know.
don't have
Well,
to
and I
manage
think
people?
I can make it more real to them if we could talk about staff here in just a second. Okay.
Yeah.
So, there's no lead to manage. If you've got great systems and protocols, leader's job isn't micromanaging what people do every day. Now, it is your job to hire well. And if I'm going to hire well, one, I want somebody with people skills. I want somebody that is self-motivated and they want to learn. You take somebody like that, even if you have to train them from the ground up, they're going to be incredible team members, a compliment. But once I've trained them and they know their job better than I know them, there's no need to manage them. All I have to do is observe, kind of measure their performance, and then manage the process. All I have to do, the process is totally different from leading the employees, the team. Managing the process, you come with great protocols and processes and systems. You can take an average employee and get an above average result. You add to that by the fact that you pick the right staff, you onboard them well, all of a sudden you've got an unstoppable team. As a leader, you're a doctor, but you're also a leader. For a lot of you, you're a shareholder in your corporation, but you're also an employee. But as a leader in your practices, you've either got to become and then remain part of the team. You are not above. Let's say we had a process where patients actually have to pay for what they have done. And then the doctor has a patient come back and it's a friend of theirs or something like that. And you just go, oh, Bob, you pay me anytime you want to. And they go up the front and the staff's ready to go through the process of financial arrangements and stuff like that. And, you've subjugated the process that you've decided was important, and you just led again in the wrong way. You modeled the wrong. Okay, so your policy manuals, your systems and protocols apply to you as a team member. I always used to joke that if I was speaking on a Friday and I died in an airplane on the way home, they would take off between 1 and 2 because that's when we had lunch to bury me. But they'd already have a doctor in there by 2 o'clock, well as I did. Okay, because this, they had this ownership mentality. You just can't mold people. I mean, managing staff is like herding cats. It's impossible. So if you'll focus on being a great leader and managing the process, you're going to see a total difference in you get.
So let me ask you this.
Go ahead, Bill.
Dr. Abernathy, let's say that you were a doctor on the pre-COVID-19 side, and you took a pretty passive view of that, and you let your people kind of do what they did, and you were a technician, and that's how you looked at quote unquote leadership, but recognize now that something does have to give, something has to change. What are those? Because there's going to be a lot of resistance. What is my team going to think? How is this going to work? Am I going to be able to have those tough conversations? How do you take those first steps towards trying to develop that skill set, like you said, since it's not innate, it's not something you're born with?
Yeah, in that type of person, I think normally doctors are non-assertive, but you do get some assertive doctors. So you're dealing with personality traits. One non-assertive, one's assertive. We'll just abbreviate the assertive ones as ASS and the non-ASS. But your goal is to be somewhere in the middle, right? And in other words, you have to be flexible enough so that when you're standing in front of a staff person or you're standing in front of your kids, that you can't treat, or a patient, you can't treat them all exactly the same way. Now, again, there are a lot of ways to do this. During the 8 weeks in which most offices have not opened, back right before we even, right as it started, I recommended that doctors start with knowing their personalities, and their normal action would be just stick their head in the sand and wait for this to blow over, because this isn't blowing over. It's climate change. It's not the perfect storm. I said, here's what I want you to do. I want you to redo your policy manual. Okay. Now, you get the opportunity right now. New office, if something's been bugging you, then change it in the policy manual. Anything at all. Now's your time to do it. Okay. Now, secondly, I want you to send your current job descriptions. And I sent them copies of job descriptions as a way to give them a starting place. And I said, just send this to your assistant, to your front desk, to your office manager, to your hygienist, whoever it is. And I want you to work with them on these, for about a week. Let them, collate them and add to or take away, and finally get it down to where, again, this is a perfect time for you to address things that you're upset about. Maybe you've got a couple of assistants. When a Marty shows up late or leaves early or doesn't empty the trash or whatever it is, all of that can be in your job descriptions. And then I encouraged them after they did it. I said, so have you got it all done? I said, yes. I said, now, you've let your staff go, right? Yes. He said, well, we actually furloughed them. I said, it still means they're not employed by you. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, or, they've been laid off, or they've been, whatever. They're taking unemployment. I said, you have the perfect time to make this work. From a financial agent, I wouldn't hire somebody back unless you can produce $20,000 per person you hire back. From the standpoint of their job descriptions and stuff like that, I would sit down and ask them, it could be over the phone, but hey, Julie, it looks like first day we're only going to have an assistant and one front desk person, just two of us and you. Now, I've been looking at your job descriptions that you sent me, and it looks great. I mean, we've both gone back and forth. You think you got everything? Absolutely, I've got everything on there. I said, so in the unlikely event that you were to not do this or forget to do it, what should I do? Okay, now, a non-assertive doctor needs for that person, because if you won't talk, they'll finally say this, I guess you should fire me. Okay, on the unlikely events that you will not or cannot or won't do what you said you could do, then we're going to let you go. Yes, sir. Okay. At least you've got some point. That policy manual and those job descriptions, it's black and white. It's not real gray. There are consequences in there. And I see this being the biggest problem with staffing, is that there are no consequences. And so, again, as you start back up, that gives you a black and white. And again, I know I was talking about not trying to manage your people, but for about 3 or 4 weeks after they come back, you want to make sure they're following the rules. And if there's any infraction, anything that they're not doing, bring it up just as an aside. Hey, Julie, I noticed that you forgot to dump your trash. Now, we're supposed to do it every day. forget or something come up, what happened? No big deal, okay? Because if you wait and get 3 or 4 things to talk about, you won't talk to them about it.
Yeah.
So just get them black and white. So we now have the playing field. We know what it takes to score. We know we're kind of in the red zone right now, right? But not the red zone where we're going to score, but on the defensive red zone. Like we've got a team pushing towards the goal. They score. We've got our back against the goal. We have strategies for this. Every football team has, and it's not just the scoring red zone. It's the other defensive too. This is what we're going to do. And it may be different than what we've done.
Yeah.
It says it's going to be different, and you hold them to it. See, leaders create the conditions where people choose new actions, and that's what drives commitment. You've got to be the person that creates conditions where people choose new actions, or you're going to need to free their future up. And this consequence, I mean, that sounds horrible letting somebody go, but even in good times, the staff needs to be a little bit concerned about being fired for the right reasons. Now, it's not right just because you lose their temper or something, but if someone, they have a job description, you've onboarded, you've trained them well, and they do not follow the protocols and systems, or they're pot stirrers, or they make your life miserable, then it's time to free up their future. And by not doing that, you're telling all the other staff that, again, you're not leading, you're leading in a bad way, that it's not important. So
you talk about, you talked about leadership, you talked about having a committed staff.
Yeah.
And in your book, The Super General Dental Practice, you specifically talk about a staff-owned practice.
Yeah.
Talk about that. What does it mean? What does it mean to have a staff-owned practice?
Okay. Now, again, imagine a 3-legged stool. It's got 3 legs. Okay. Now, the things in front, and we won't talk about those, but the legs would be purpose-driven. And I do think that's kind of the most important, why you're there. That's the culture part of it. Purpose-driven, doctor-led, and then this staff-owned kind of just a whole different way of looking. It's no longer a job, it's a profession for your staff. And so this staff-owned mentality is something that we never referred to it as my practice. It was always our practice. And, in our practice, we do this. In our practice, we don't do that. And so in the process of creating that culture, we created this commitment on the staff's part to treat the practice and the patients and the business as if they owned it. And everything they did, created a ripple effect. I'll give you an example. I had a hygienist, Vicky, and another hygienist that we just hired. We'd hired her about 6 months before. She went on a week's vacation. But during those 6 weeks, Vicky had been with me 20 years, saw some of her patients, okay? And there was tartar and calculus. And she didn't tell me. She didn't tell the office manager. She merely waited for that hygienist came back, and she had taken photographs and x-rays of these patients and said, "Hey, I need to talk to you for a few minutes." And they went in a room on their own. She shuts the door, and she takes those photographs and pitches them out and goes, "That is a lack of integrity. This is our practice. You either put on your big girl panties and deal with this or hit the door." And they had a talk, and she says, "Look, I'm not going to tell Dr. Atherley. I'm not going to tell the office manager. This between us. I won't say another word. But if I ever see this, that will be your last day." Okay. And she has no power to do that. She's given herself to do it. That's that ownership mentality. I used to interview staff, and we had a conference room, and it was small, for talking with patients. But I would move a trash can over, and it was within, I don't know, 2 feet of the chair that this prospective staff person was going to sit in. And I put a piece of paper on the floor next to the trash can. If they didn't pick up, I let them sit there for about 4 minutes before I came in. They didn't pick up the paper and put it in the trash can, I didn't hire them. And my staff, with this staff ownership mentality, I involve them in everything. They hired the doctors that became partners. They hired other staff. They were well paid, and they had a profit, a bonus system, but a profit sharing plan. So in a staff-owned practice, there's got to be high communication. In Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, if you've never taken the time to read about leadership and team building, Patrick Lencioni, looks great. But 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, one of them, and I can't remember all 5, but one's a lack of trust, one's avoidance of conflict. I mean, it goes down the line. But again, you won't have high trust without communication. And communication isn't just saying the right thing. It's making sure that the patient staff, that the staff heard what you thought you said, right? It's a two-way street. It's not just one way. High communication. Alignment of vision. How are they going to know if they're in alignment with the vision if you never tell them what's core or what's reality in that practice, okay? And we're doing it a little bit with the policy manual. We're doing it a little bit with the job descriptions. We're doing a bunch of it with what we do, model, but we also need to say it with our mouth and let everybody hear it. Participative leadership. Not only did they select and actually give the final thumbs up, thumbs down on doctors, whatever, they saw the numbers every month, okay? They saw what we spent on staff. I mean, the percentage that we spent on staff. They knew that it should be between 25 and 27%. They knew that the hygienists should be producing at least 3 times what they were paid. They saw all of these deals every month, and they kept the formula and the numbers on the profit sharing or bonus system that they had. And they never missed a bonus system. In fact, that profit sharing became such a large part of what they made that their base was more than they could make anywhere else. That bonus system was another $2,000 or $3,000 a month in addition to that. And share responsibility. I mean, when you have ownership, and occasionally you'll have the front is kind of against the clinical staff and against the hygienist. The hygienist is against everybody. I mean, it's like it's not a team, it's a group of people that work together. It's like the culture smooths out, and they understand that we're all in the same boat, and that if we don't help somebody else get through, they won't get to leave on time. I was always modeling. I was the first person there. I was the last person to leave. I turned everything on. At the end of the day, I stuck stuff through the vacuum machine because that hygienist who just finished with a brand new patient was inspiring that patient and getting them to set up an appointment for me to do work. So I ran in there and pulled her trash and stuck through there. So when she got through, we all left at the same time. They were future focused. I mean, I was constant. I never looked out 1 week or 2 weeks. I was always looking at 5 or 10 years about what we were doing. And it just became a habit, okay? So when you start hiring these staff, do not hire for experience. We've already said this. Hire for attitude, ability to solve problems, kind of a service state of mind. In other words, serving our patients, and their people skills. That'll mean the world to you getting a running start at a great culture and a staff-owned practice.
So Dr. Abernathy, let's say you have this doctor who has, in his mind, he's evolved, or her mind, that they do want to become a leader, and they want to have this staff-owned practice. And you talked about one tactical step that if you're going to own a business, you should know the numbers. We've heard, the viewers have heard us talk about this over and over and over. How do you do that? That's going to scare a lot of doctors to death. They're like, well, these people are going to know how much money I make, and then they're going to be furious that, that I'm showing them this stuff. How do you show it in a way that's impactful, but also maybe allows the doctors to have a little bit of anonymity in some of their, take home perhaps? Yeah. I mean,
again, they don't know what our debt is and stuff like that. But again, I take the profit and loss statement and I would just dumb it down into those 6 categories: compensation, facility, dental supplies, lab, marketing, office supplies. And again, it includes everything. If we run it like a cash flow statement, it includes everything there. And I give them the percentage, Now, again, that doesn't happen in a day. We might start with just telling the hygienists, look, guys, I need you to produce at least 3 times what you're paid. And you should be doing about a third of the total production. And so that was one of the numbers, and it's in the book, in that Super General Dental Practice book. It explains this in great depth. But at the same time, I'm educating the staff to the business side of dentistry, not just to, I mean, I think the biggest thing that holds people back is thinking their job is just doing the dentistry. I mean, when really all of those staff people that you have working for you are there to inspire patients. Now, they may happen to suck spit all day or set up a room and tear it down, but they've got to understand the business side of it. And so I just started educating on that. So the hygienist, I would take the production by provider, I would divide it into what I would take it back. Their production provider, divide that production into what they were paid, which converts it to a percentage. And I showed them, I'm paying you 53% of what you're collecting. It needs to be closer to 30%. So, and I mean, we just started working on those things. And again, you have an opportunity to kind of have a do-over, start-over deal. And so if you're just starting out, I'd take some time to do it. Easy way to do it is, you guys have got a copy of the book. You can send them that digitally. You can take a chapter out of it and just do a staff meeting on the overhead items and kind of that matrix of business and help educate them where they kind of own it. It's that, they can't own something they don't understand.
That's right.
Einstein said that, when you're talking about information, that it's really not knowledge. There's got to be there's a transformation from just seeing it or hearing it to the application of that information. And I think it's important that you take the time to do it. Most doctors don't onboard staff very well, don't take the time to educate the staff because they don't see the ripple effect of how important that'll be on their bottom line, on all their productivity. And my staff, literally, you could walk in and ask anybody, how many new patients did you gotten so far this month? They could tell you. We posted all this information, graphs that people did in the staff deal. They constantly were bombarded and seeing it. They were reminded at the staff meetings kind of where they were and how good they did it. We patted them on the back. And if they were struggling, we came along beside them and partnered with them to get better at what they were doing.
I think something you just said there hit my radar when I'm talking to dentists or business owners in general. They're always getting frustrated at, let's just say, Julie, the hygienist. You're always getting frustrated. Right. Like, she's just not performing. She's not producing what we need to, and you're just getting so frustrated. And if you really sit and think about it, have you ever told Julie what she should be doing or what winning in her job looks like? Does she need to be, 30% on the production side? So that's before you get frustrated, but before you get frustrated, tell them what winning in their job looks like. Mm-hmm. And then once they know if they're not winning, then you can point back, hey, remember we talked about this is what it looks like.
I did one thing with one doctor because he was like that with his assistant. And he was emotionally upset all the time because, she didn't want to do a bad job. But so I said, here, let's do this. Let's take blank piece of paper, and you, doctor, you write down the job description for the assistant, and assistant, you write your job description down. And then take the papers and set them side by side, and let's read them together.
That's right.
Resemble each other. I said, now, okay. And I tell doctors this all the time. If you ever have to free up somebody's future, you need to consider at least 50% of the problem was you. Okay? Yeah. But you look at it and you go, if they're not exactly the same, so that's why I want them to do the job descriptions so that you both are on the same page, then, she's going to go, well, I never know you wanted me to do that. I mean, I couldn't figure it that you were just having a bad day or you're an asshole or what. I mean, I don't know. Just, it's like you were just being into me. And she says, I don't want to do a bad job. That's why I want to be really good at this. But if you don't say something, if you're non-assertive, oftentimes you just, you shy away from that. That's why I'm saying starting over gives the opportunity to write this stuff down because you're not talking to the patient. You're talking to the assistant. You're talking to all the assistants from now on. And you constantly upgrade those job descriptions to adapt to different situations, And you know, it's your policy manual and your job descriptions, they never are a destination. They're constantly evolving to adapt to an ever-changing, you know, arena that you're playing in. So,
Well, let me ask you this, Dr. Abernathy. I love your story about your team member who pulled another member inside
yeah,
and basically self-police the culture and the standard of excellence. You know, a lot of places, you know, a lot of businesses we work with, I mean, that's the meeting after the meeting, or it's the coffee room or break room, you
yeah,
know, conversations. How do you get from if you have an environment that has those kind of problems embedded in the culture, to
right.
the point where you're actually having more of a self-policing, and that sounds so draconian, but I mean,
Right.
environment where people hold each other to the highest standard. How do you get from point A to point B in that situation? That's got to be.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it'll depend on the size of your practice. I mean, you get, you know, 23 employees, it's like an ocean liner, and literally for them to turn, they have to plan on turning 5 miles out. They have to slow. They've got to hit the, you know, the port jets. They've got to, I mean, you know, and it's a real slow deal. Now, if you're just starting out and you're in a canoe or in a kayak, you can pretty well flip that puppy around pretty quick. You know, it's like everybody that, you know, of the 2 employees, everybody that works for me, let's number off 1, 2. Okay. 1, 2. Okay. The 2s, you no longer have a job here. I mean, you know, it's like, you know, you can do that. But again, when I'm working with offices that already have an ingrained culture that's not great, and I try to explain to the doctor, I said, you know, you can't do this with everybody at once. I think you need to start informing everybody, but you're going to have to find at least 1 or 2 people that you feel comfortable enough that you could sit down and go, this is what I want to do. And I'm not willing to keep people here that don't want to do that. Help me understand how you feel about this. And, you know, and you walk through getting them where they're up to deal. And it's interesting, you know, oftentimes they'll have a friend in the office. They'll go, hey, Dr. Anthony's going to be changing some things, and this is what he wants us to do. And then you get those 2 or 3 people together, and then you start rolling it out for everybody with the idea. I mean, you've told the people that are the made men, you know, they're part of the Goombas now, the mafia here. They're the made folks here. That, look, we're not going to tolerate anything less than this, you know, and I would rather it happen sooner than later. So who do you think not going to make it? And they tell you, and everybody agrees, then you're going to start looking at those 2 people or 1 person, and with the idea that I'm going to replace them. Now, you actually you can actually create phantom pressure as you're working from the inside out, and you don't even know who you might let go, or if you're going to have to let anybody go. It doesn't hurt to interview people during this process. I mean, you know, I'm always looking to upgrade my staff. Now, if I can't find anybody to upgrade them to, then I've kind of done my job, right? I mean, they own the, you know, they understand what's going on, and they understand that, you know, if I can't hit, you know, I can't block people, or I can't make so many receptions, or I can't make so many, you know, completed passes, I'm not going to be around long, okay? And longevity should not play into this. Titles should not play into this. And you know, if you actually step back and look at this, you may be surprised at the people that you're going, the person I trust the most, the person who's been the longest, is the person that has to go. Because you know, they won't let us grow. That's really hard to do. Again, when we do it, I try to start with a couple of people, and I usually explain it to them. The doctor doesn't. I said, look, why do you think you guys struggle? And we already talked about where they were struggling. So he's going, well, the doctor shows up, leaves early. You know, he's in a bad mood all day. I said, okay, we got to talk to the doctor, right? Yep. And I said, why are you still here? And they're going, I don't know. You know, I've thought about leaving a bunch of times. I mean, that's, you're sitting there, oh my gosh, the doctor knows none of this. So sometimes it's going to be the doctor that's the problem. I have a review sheet of the doctor. And when we start making these difficult confrontations with people, whether you call it a job review or even in a group, I always felt it wasn't fair for me to jump somebody without them to actually do the same thing to me first. And so I printed I'll send it to you. You can do with it whatever you want to. But it's a review of the doctor. And here's what I did with the staff. I said, look, fill this out. Do not put your name on it. Do not put your position on it. Okay. You fax it to me, and I'll take a clean copy, and I will type in, it had like 4 different, levels, and I'll put where all the numbers lie. And if you had any comments, I'll type it in. We'll give it to the doctor. I've had doctors read it and throw it in the trash and start cussing and fire me.
Right.
Okay. I mean, it's, like you can't handle the truth kind of deal.
Yeah.
Okay. And I've had other doctors, I said, now look, you're not going to like what they say.
Yeah.
I am not saying what they say is true. I'm saying that this is their perception of you and what you do. And perception's everything. Now, this happened, the one that threw it the deal, I grabbed him. I said, you need to read this again. Because you just confirmed everything that's on there.
Yeah.
Okay. And I said, look, you're a big boy. You can look at this. And you've got a bunch of debt. You haven't saved your money. You haven't done things right. You need to put this back together. I want you to read it, unfold it, and look at it again. Let's talk about it. I want you to post this in the staff area. I want you to try and improve in these 4 different areas. Okay, now, they don't expect you to change completely, I assure you. But just showing them that you cared enough about what they said to try to do better will make all the difference in the world. Okay,
Yep.
I mean, if I were talking to your wives and I said, okay, we're going to do a husband review.
Oh boy.
Yes. I mean, can you imagine how effect that would have with your, now, I'll tell you something right here, and I don't want to go any further. I'll start crying when I do this. Okay. I'll give you a question that you could correct all of the bad relationships with a staff person, all the bad relationships you have with your son or daughter, and all the bad relationships you would have with your spouse. You just ask that person. Let's say it's your wife or a son that's 16. He's coming home drunk, and he's almost toe to toe with you about stuff. You need to go to them and say, look, would you please tell me what I need to do to be the dad you always thought I'd be? Or the boss you always thought I'd be? Or the wife I always thought I'd be? And then be quiet. It's a powerful question.
Yeah.
And they've never thought that you would consider that what they thought was important enough to ask their opinion. And so, again, it's a really, I mean, when it's, now when we got together, we argued, okay, in that 5 dysfunctions of a team. The next, was like trust. The next one's is fear of conflict. I mean, if people don't trust and you're in a meeting and I see someone with their arms crossed, I'm going to go, Susie, tell me, and it happened this way. I mean, she could have been in kindergarten and the teacher says, okay, what is the capital of Texas? And she goes, oh, call on me. And she says, okay, Susie, what is it? And she goes, Dallas, Texas. And she says, no, and now guys are different. You just turn in kindergarten, you go, dumbass, and hit him in the arm, and you're still friends. But women can go, I don't know, they go, they can make their face do something, and it means something worse than dumbass, and then it scars that person, and they won't ever, there's not trust. And so we have to create that trust. You can't let somebody be a pot stirrer in there. And then that fear of conflict. Now, you may have grown up in a family where you don't talk out when your parents say something, or it's not your place to, so if you don't have trust and you don't have fear of you do have fear of conflict and you don't speak up, then there's going to be no commitment. There's going to be and you're going to avoid, being accountable. Read that book. It'll take you an hour and a half in the form of a parable, but you will never forget those lessons. And you go, wow, maybe I could do that. And he's got another book called something about a perfect team member, how to find
Ideal team player.
Ideal team player. And it actually should have been written before the 5 dysfunctions of a team, because it fixes, it's the solution. I mean, I read that 5 dysfunctions of a team. I said, I bought the one that had the you could take the test to measure where. I thought, man, I'm gonna ace this sucker. You know, we were horrible. You know, it's like I had a great self-image for no apparent reason. Okay, so anyway, we started working on it, and he came out with that book. And you know what I liked about that ideal team player? It was like I loved the book because that's exactly how we selected our team.
Yep.
Exactly how we did it. And, you know, and I do believe, you know, every one of his books are incredibly good. And they're not made for dentistry, so when you read it, it's not going to mention dentist, okay? It's for the corporate world. But they're all short, told in the form of a parable. It helps you remember them, and even staff can read them. So
yeah, no, we agree 100%. And that's how we hire too. You know, the ideal team player, we came across that several years ago, and that's, you know, those are the 3 items: hungry, humble, and people smart that we look at when we hire people.
Well, so you know, there's another way, Jared. There's another way to look at that too. If you read the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and you go, man, I really screwed up. If you read the other one first, I already do that.
That's right.
You screw up, and you go back and read that book. That other book really makes sense. Because yeah, I did that. Oh my gosh, I did that. So, I'm sorry.
So let's leave let's end on this. So leadership, you know, I was going to end on what are some good takeaways somebody, you know, doctors can do to look at leadership and also a staff-owned practice. But the leadership, I mean, you said it's something, A, you're not born with.
Right.
2, you've got to work on. You know, right. I think, you know, one of the big takeaways I would take away is if you haven't read Lencioni's 2 books, you know, the 5 dysfunctions and then also the ideal team player, read those as well. But what can a doctor start doing in their practice today to transition? Maybe they've got their practice all like this, and they don't show their team anything, and
right.
they don't their staff don't know the numbers, and the staff doesn't have much. They don't know what winning in their job looks like, etc. What can somebody do to implement or transition to a staff-owned practice? Again, it's not overnight. You're not going to flip a switch and say I'm staff-owned tomorrow. What can they slowly start doing?
I really am not a people person, but I spent every time I get into car, you know, it was Earl Nightingale and, you know, cassette. I constantly, I mean, even though I didn't even like what I was listening to, it did dripping on me with positive leadership deals from experts helped, you know. The trouble is you're not going to find a lot of really good books on leadership out there for dentists. The best one that I've seen specifically for dentists is called Face to Face by Joel Small, an endodontist and it's really good, okay? But again, I tend to look for models that aren't in dentistry. I mean, it doesn't have to be a dentist or anything.
Sure.
But I think the best thing I ever did was constantly dripping on myself with topics about leadership and about team building and you know, good to great. And I mean, all the great books, I mean, that you kind of go, wow, now after I could probably look at a summary of a book now that was 4 pages long and get everything I needed out of it. But immersing yourself that way that you at least admit that this is a shortfall and then understand that I don't have to remain here. I can learn these things. One of the easiest things I did to start getting, I mean, for most of us, our staff are female. Whether you're a female doctor or a male doctor, one of the things in my uniform, I carried 7 marbles in my right pocket. And I would try to find 6 or 7 people doing something good that day and tell them that they did it good. And I would put that marble in my left pocket. I got in the habit of doing that. And now, the subtlety was I wasn't looking for the bad things anymore. Okay? And the staff goes, they got reinforcement when they did good things, and so they stopped doing the bad things. And it was easy as a non-assertive doctor just to go, oh, yeah, I need to do that. I've still got 4 marbles in my pocket and do that. I mean, there's so many little tricks I play with myself to make this work, you know, for me. And it just works for me. You know, some of you are listening to that, well, that's the stupidest thing I ever heard. But it's those small steps. I mean, like when I said that 1% of, you know, what, you know, it's getting where I can actually get my hands around that, the little bites, you know. If I'm going to eat an elephant, you start with one bite, you know,
That's
and
right,
I need a small enough bite that I can start on that and commit. I'm going to do something today to make that happen.
Yeah. And I'll add one more in there. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, one thing I will say real quick as we're kind of wrapping up here is what I love is we keep going back to that self-diagnosis, and leadership's right. You have to diagnose yourself. Are you want to be there? It's kind of like, are you the leader or the boss? You know, how do I get to that, to be the leader or boss that you want me and I want to be? That takes a lot of vulnerability. And hearing you talk about how you looked at yourself and how you really challenge the people, the doctors you work with, a lot of it gets back to being willing to be vulnerable and to kind of model that behavior. And then hopefully you start to build some of that trust that gets that staff-owned team. So that's outstanding stuff.
Yeah. So guys, that's good stuff. I mean, leadership, as you can see, you know, especially right now, opening your shop, but going through this, just think if you would have started this pandemic having that great leadership, you know, and then your staff, you're telling your staff, hey, we got to lay you off or furlough you, et cetera. That staff's really going to trust you, where maybe before you didn't have good leadership, and that staff, you know, the staff are kind of looking at you like, wow, I don't know. I'm really, really scared for my position. Not sure what this is going to look like. So the importance of leadership is huge. And I'll add one too. So we said, read Liccioni's books, read Dr. Abernathy's book, The Super General Dental Practice. I mean, talking about the staff-owned practice, you know, we talk about that purpose-driven, doctor-led, staff-owned. Read the book, read the chapters on that at the very least, and figure out how to get your practice like that. Because once you do, you're all in it together. It's not just you as a doctor, as the owner, driving the ship. You've got a whole bunch of people, right? You've got all those committed staff around you that's going to take you to the next level. So guys, I appreciate, go ahead.
Jared, let me say one other thing. I did this last time we were talking too, but when you're talking, I just think of these things. I mean, imagine, you know, we talk about the symptoms of COVID, right? 105 fever, you know, dry cough, splotches on your feet, whatever it is. If you're sitting out here and watching this and you haven't already self-diagnosed yourself, you've got that disease. Okay. I'm sorry. You know, we're exceptional thinkers and we always say, yeah, but where I am, it's, you know, or I've already heard that before, it don't work or whatever it is. I mean, if you're sitting here listening to this and you have not done that self-diagnosis, shame on you.
Yeah.
Okay. You're probably the problem. So
that's right.
Anyway, I hope it's not, but you know.
Self-diagnosis, I mean, going back to what we do at our firm, our proven process, the first step is diagnosis. You can't go anywhere unless you know where you currently are. So, guys, this is good stuff. We could talk all day, but let's wrap this one up. Leadership, staff-owned practice. If you're not doing that right now in your practice, grab Dr. Abernathy's book, start diving in, and you're definitely going to get better. So, guys, appreciate the time. Till next time, keep getting better.
Yeah.